The idea was that we were going to just make behind the scenes videos to recap the whole European tour. And then once we found out we had like so much kind of interesting stuff and so much content, it was like, well, we could maybe, make something bigger with this. And I think we made like a teaser for that. And it was like, oh, well, let's do the next tour and then let's combine and see what we come up with. And I think like during those two tours, we realized that like there was kind of like a story that was going on in Joe's life right at that moment. And especially with like the album and Shockwave. So we kind of made it about, how these two tours symbolized a bit of change in his career and a little reflection and also looking forward and what was happening in the present. And you'll see that because we jumped kind of like, back and forth between tours and stuff, which may be a little confusing, but it's actually really interesting. So
that was a certain moment of time, and the whole thing about this character of different sides of your own personality that you're working through, as it were. And you've now done a couple albums since then. Do you have any perspective this amount of time after that film and those tours?
Yeah, it's so interesting that, when I'm in the middle of trying to reinvent myself, I totally, kind of block out the past and I don't review footage of myself sitting there struggling to move forward. But that's what happened. That's what Zizi was capturing. That was so interesting, that the story that he was beginning to see on the dailies, so to speak, was this sort of struggle happening. And once I got to see it, it really was quite emotional, I think, because I don't think it helps when you're trying to push forward to keep going back. But this reminded me that, it's quite a struggle you go through. Good thing we were on tour, because we got to have the best fun every night and kind of push that struggle like in the back of your mind, and just enjoy the music and celebrate the music with the fans. But what really revealed itself in the film was, in fact, that's what was happening. And I think the way Zizi put the film together, jumping back and forth, really illustrated that. And I mean, there are scenes there where it's really intense when I think back to how difficult it was to move forward, just like the birthday scene on stage and other times like being on the bus when it looks really mellow, but actually I'm deep down involved in some sort of emotional musical struggle. Again, it comes back to me when I see the film, because it's captured so beautifully, and I think it just gets more intense as the years go by. Now it's only 5 years later, but it's like, wow. Now I look at this guy and I go, really? That's who I invented to get over all that crazy stuff, and that's Zizi caught all that on film.
It's filmed, so beautifully. It's got a lot of really unique perspectives, and obviously the sort of access that you had is not just being there filming for this project, but being family, so people don't really treat you the same way as, say, like some external film crew that's come in. And so that's a really cool thing. And any particular scenes or shots that you were really pleased with how they turned out, Zizi?
Man, well, first of all, I gotta say, I actually got the camera like not too long before the start of the tour, so I was kind of learning how to use it at that moment. But I think maybe that was a good thing, because it made you want to try out more stuff, as opposed to, if you're really comfortable, you just kind of like stick to what you know. But I was like, oh, I can try different things. And that ended up in me filming like a lot of really random stuff. And then it actually made it into the, final cut of the film, which is, looking back, is like, wow, it's so weird that I chose to film that. I like the beginning of the surfing section, part 2. And it's this montage of just like very kind of strange ambient scenes that I don't know. Maybe some people are like, why am I looking at, why are we staying on this shot so long? But to me, it just like represents being on tour and just kind of like zoning out and thinking about, your life. And meanwhile, you're just kind of like half jet lag, sitting on some park bench, just like looking at some pigeon on a statue or something.
That's so true. I mean, that is so true. There is that part of touring where you're a zombie during the day, you're saving up all your energy for those few hours in the evening, and you realize that the rest of the people in your circus are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
I think, I'm the most proud of the shots that are of absolutely nothing and don't make any sense. And then I just chose to put them in there. And it's like, hell yeah, that was bold. Instead of like cool face shots of people and faces and action, who needs action when you got statues?
Well, that's the other thing that's really nice about it, is that all this extra music is actually really a big part of the film too. It's like it does bring you in a different way, where it's gives that sort of space to be in those weird moments where you're kind of like, and if it was just silence, or if it was, just a bunch of live, performance music, it would not be the same sort of depth of experience, I think. And so you did a lot of that stuff yourself, and then you both worked on stuff together, right?
Yeah. As I remember, Joe had a lot of kind of leftover tracks. Some were like, more fleshed out than others. And that was perfect. It weirdly was like, oh, this is really kind of documentary appropriate music. So that wasn't hard at all. I think I just had to like come up with a couple like, bridge the gap little, tracks that were mainly just drone, songs. So yeah, that was actually a very, very easy process. Sometimes the music search is like, the longest part of the process because you can't get the right vibe, but this one just kind of fell into our laps.